Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something a little different, a really fascinating piece of source material. We aren't looking at a single article or, some dense report. We're actually dissecting the foundational blueprint for an entire licensed profession. Our source is the table of contents in front matter for Mini-Cram Real Estate Exam Study Notes, Course 1 Real Estate Essentials. This one's updated for the 2020 Humber Real Estate exams.
That's absolutely right. And for anyone who's ever been curious about what it really takes to become a real estate professional, I mean, a truly well-informed one, this document is basically the entire curriculum map laid out. We're treating this list of 23 chapters, not just as an index, but as the exhaustive checklist of what a professional has to know.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Our mission for this deep dive is really to analyze the scope, the sequence of these topics. We want to understand the foundational, legal, ethical, and regulatory knowledge that is deemed essential. We're essentially turning this table of contents into an organizational map of the whole industry. And in doing that, I think we'll reveal the deep complexity that's really behind every single transaction.
What's fascinating here, and you see it right away, is the methodical structure. The syllabus doesn't just, jump right into contracts or the flashy stuff. It starts by establishing the professional's role. Then it defines the core legal asset, which is land itself. And only then does it start to systematically overlay all these layers of law. You get everything from specific professional conduct standards to public planning, specialized property types, and then finally, these really critical modern compliance issues, like money laundering controls.
And when you see that framework laid out, it hits you. You realize pretty quickly that the job is so much more complex than just facilitating a handshake. For you listening, whether you're thinking about the profession or maybe you work in an adjacent field, or even if you're just buying or selling property, understanding this structure, it really delivers those aha moments. You start to grasp the profound legal responsibility that's inherent in this field.
Indeed. It clarifies that a real estate professional at their core is really an informed risk manager. They're a guide through what is essentially a minefield of legal requirements. This whole curriculum, it reflects that necessary blend of professional ethics, fundamental land law, both micro and macroeconomic awareness, and this really strict regulatory adherence that's required to safeguard the public interest.
That sets the stage perfectly. So let's start where every aspiring professional starts, what the source calls the practitioner's gateway. So the first section begins with this very practical grouping. We have topics 1 and 2, a career in real estate, and then opportunities in real estate market. Why start there? Why is the very first lesson about the nature of the job itself? And how does this study guide seem to differentiate between career and opportunities?
It's a crucial distinction, and starting there is very intentional. Topic 1. A career in real estate is all about looking inward. It focuses on the professional requirements. It would cover the licensing process, the structure of a brokerage, working for a principal broker, the different compensation models, and the high degree of self-management that's required. And of course, the continuous education mandate. It's the what does my day-to-day look like? And more importantly, what are my legal duties?
So it's the scaffolding, the legal and logistical framework of the role itself.
Precisely. Then, topic 2, opportunities in real estate market, shifts the focus outward to the economic reality. This is where the professional has to ground their advice in actual data. They have to understand the market cycle. I mean, how do recessions, how does inflation, unemployment, how do those things affect supply and demand? They need to be able to analyze different market segments. Is the opportunity right now in residential resale? Or is it in new construction, commercial leasing, or maybe land development?
Right. Because a broker who only understands their commission split but doesn't get the impact of, say, a 50 basis point rate hike they're fundamentally unprepared to advise a client.
That's the core insight right there. These topics mandate that a professional must understand the volatility, the macroeconomic factors of the environment they're working in. They need to know where to look for business and how these huge external economic forces might impact their client's most valuable asset. The initial competency isn't just selling, it's about understanding the economic weather.
Okay, moving on. Topic 3 is real estate trading terminology. I know every industry has its jargon, but here, given the legal implications, I suspect this section carries enormous weight.
Oh, it carries the weight of massive potential liability. This is not about sounding fluent or, talking the talk. It's about being legally precise. Real estate law relies on these very specific, sometimes archaic definitions, and misusing a single term can void a contract or trigger a really expensive lawsuit.
Can you give us an example, a technical distinction that a registrant would have to master?
Sure. A classic one is the difference between a fixture and a chattel. A fixture is legally considered part of the real property because it's permanently attached. Think of a built-in cabinet or the furnace. A chattel, on the other hand, is personal property. It's the freestanding refrigerator, a painting on the wall. When a property is sold, fixtures are automatically included unless they're explicitly excluded in the contract. Chattels are not.
Right. And if a buyer assumes that the custom-mounted television is a fixture and the seller walks out with it,
Yeah.
that can completely unravel a closing.
Exactly. And the broker who drafted that contract, or the one who failed to clarify the distinction, is the one who takes the legal heat. It's the same with terms like easement, the right to use someone else's land for a specific purpose, like a shared driveway, or fee simple, which is the highest form of land ownership. They have to be understood unequivocally. This whole step is about standardizing the language to minimize risk, really semantic risk, in every transaction.
That leads us right into topic 4, industry organizations. So if the terminology is the language, who acts as the Supreme Court, making sure that language is used correctly and ethically?
These organizations, and they're typically provincial or state-level real estate councils or associations, they serve multiple critical functions. First, they manage the entire licensing process. They ensure competence through exams that are based on this very curriculum. Second, and this is key, they act as the enforcement mechanism. They investigate complaints and they apply disciplinary action against registrants who breach the standards of conduct.
So they aren't just trade groups. They actually hold significant regulatory power over an individual's ability to even practice.
Absolutely. They are essential for maintaining public trust. They establish codes of ethics and standards of practice that often go way beyond the bare minimum of civil law. They ensure everyone adheres to the rules, the grammar, and the dictionary, to use your analogy, and that protects both the consumer and the integrity of the market by, frankly, weeding out incompetence or unethical behavior. Every professional knows that if they fail to comply with their organization's rules, it can result in the loss of their livelihood.
So we've established the professional context, the language, the oversight. Now the course pivots. It moves from the practitioner to the core asset itself.
The land. Okay, Section 2. This dives straight into the heavy legal lifting. Topic 5 is ownership rights and limitations, and it's paired with Topic 6, description of land. Why are rights and limitations presented as inseparable? Because, in law, ownership of land is almost never absolute. It's best understood as a bundle of rights. So Topic 5 is there to define that bundle. The right to possess the land, the right to use it, the right to dispose of it, so sell, lease, or mortgage it, and, of course, the right to exclude others from it.
But the limitations part is the real focus, isn't it? I mean, that's where the potential problems lie.
Precisely. The limitations are all the caveats, and they include huge government powers like the power of taxation, the power of eminent domain, or expropriation, as it's often called, which is the right of the government to take private property for public use, with compensation. And then there's the inherent police power, which is what we see applied later on through things like
And you called fee simple. The government can still step in and tell me I can't open a pig farm on it.
That is a perfect example. And beyond that, you also have private limitations. Things like restrictive covenants that were agreed upon by previous owners. Maybe it's a rule that all homes in a subdivision have to have red roofs, or it could be one of those easements we mentioned, giving a utility company the right to access your backyard for maintenance. A broker has to be an expert in finding and explaining these limitations because they directly impact what the client can do with the property and what it's worth.
And before we can even begin to discuss those rights, we have to know exactly what piece of land we're talking about. Which brings us to Topic 6. Description of land. This sounds very, very technical.
It is fundamental. It's all about preventing boundary disputes. The legal description of a piece of land must be completely unambiguous. What that means in practice is that it has to be so precise that a competent land surveyor can take that description and locate the exact boundaries on the ground.
And how is that precision actually achieved? The material mentioned things like meets and bounds and registered plans.
Yeah, those are the main methods. Older properties, you might still see a meets and bounds description. It relies on physical markers, compass bearings, distances, often referencing things like, from the old oak tree or along the stone wall. As you can imagine, that method is prone to ambiguity as those markers disappear over time. So modern systems much prefer the registered plan system or the lot and block system. A surveyor maps out a whole tract of land, they register that plan with the government, and then the legal description is just simple. It's Lot 14, Block B, Plan 6789. That gives you immediate, high certainty delineation. The broker's duty here is to make sure the contract uses the correct, legally recorded description, not just the street address.
Okay, so once we define the land and the rights attached to it, we need Topic 7, Land Registration Acts. This seems to be where the state steps in to turn those abstract rights into secure, publicly verifiable records.
This topic is all about market trust and efficiency. These registration acts establish the public record of who owns what and what interests are on the property. In many jurisdictions, this involves a shift toward what's called a Torrens-style system. It's title-based, not deed-based.
What's the practical difference for a home buyer between a deed system and a title system?
Well, in a deed system, you basically hold a collection of documents, the deeds, and you have to prove that the chain of ownership is unbroken. That can leave a lot of uncertainty. But in a modern title system, the state essentially guarantees the ownership that's recorded on the public register. So if you're recorded as the owner, you are the owner, and the state actually indemnifies you against errors. It just dramatically simplifies the due diligence for the buyer and cuts down on the legal risk. A broker has to understand the system to advise clients on searches for things like mortgages, liens, judgments, or anything else that might cloud the title before closing.
Now we transition to the human element, the rules governing the professional who's acting on all this. We have Topic 8, the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act, or REBA, and Topic 9, Conduct of Registrants. This feels like the highest standard of behavior.
These two topics, they really are the heart of professional accountability. REBA is the specific provincial legislation that grants the authority to trade in real estate. It's the law that establishes the regulatory body, the licensing requirements, and the fundamental duties of the person registered to trade.
And Topic 9, Conduct of Registrants, that operationalizes the ethical framework. What specific standards must a broker meet that would distinguish them from, say, a car salesperson?
The central distinguishing factor is fiduciary duty. It's a legal concept. It means the agent or the registrant must legally place the client's interests above their own, and that includes their own financial gain. Topic 9 codifies this by requiring things like mandatory disclosure of any conflicts of interest, competence requirements, so you're not practicing outside your area of expertise, and absolute honesty and fair dealing.
So if a broker knows that a major highway is planned to run right behind a house their client is about to buy, and they fail to disclose that because they just want the quick sale, that's not just bad ethics, it's a legal breach of conduct under REBA.
Absolutely. It's a clear breach of the fiduciary duty of disclosure. Failing to disclose material facts, misrepresentation, or just failing to exercise reasonable care, those are all grounds for disciplinary action, for fines, or even for the loss of a license. This entire framework is there to ensure public protection by holding the professional to a very rigorous standard of care.
And all of those legal and ethical steps, they culminate in Topic 10, the contract law. This is the mechanism that actually binds the deal.
This is the practical engine of the whole transaction. And while general contract principles do apply, the need for an offer and acceptance, consideration real estate contracts are uniquely complex. And that's because of the asset's immobility and its high value.
What makes a real estate contract so uniquely challenging compared to, let's say, a sales contract for goods?
Well, first, there's usually something called the statute of frauds, which dictates that any contract for land has to be in writing. Second, the forms themselves are highly standardized, and they require very specific clauses about disclosures, like known defects and also conditions precedent.
Conditions precedent. That sounds like the financing and inspection clauses we always hear about.
That's precisely what they are. They are conditions that absolutely must be satisfied before the contract becomes legally binding. Understanding how to properly draft, insert, and then waive a financing condition or an inspection condition is just paramount. A mistake here, like failing to properly notify the other party of a waiver or fulfillment by the deadline, that can instantly kill the deal and expose the broker to a liability lawsuit from their own client for negligence. Contract law is the topic where all the previous legal concepts, clear title, defined rights, ethical conduct, are all practically applied and tested.
That was the bedrock, a huge amount of foundational knowledge. So we've established the rights to the asset and the rules of the trade. Now, let's explore how the modern world and public governance impose these additional, often very restrictive layers of regulation onto that deal. Okay, this next section introduces some surprisingly disparate topics. Topic 11 is e-commerce, privacy, and family laws. That grouping, it seems a little counterintuitive at first. You've got digital transactions meeting domestic affairs.
It reflects the high-risk intersections in modern practice. The grouping is necessary because each one of these components introduces a severe modern liability risk for the professional.
Let's start with e-commerce and privacy then. What's the broker's specific challenge here in the digital age?
Well, the shift to digital transactions means brokers are constantly dealing with electronic records. They're communicating very sensitive information over email, and they're using electronic signatures. E-commerce law has to be understood to make sure that these digital acts, an emailed offer, an e-signature, have the exact same legal validity as a handwritten document.
And privacy compliance. I have to imagine they handle a massive amount of PII, personally identifiable information.
An incredible amount, absolutely. They handle financial histories, credit checks, identification documents, and some very sensitive personal motivations for buying or selling. So privacy legislation, it requires really strict protocols for securing all that data, for disclosing what data is being collected, and for obtaining consent. A data breach, maybe from a lost laptop or a phishing attack, it exposes the brokerage to massive regulatory fines and just irreparable damage to client trust. The professional has to be a digital security gatekeeper.
Then we have family law thrown in there.
Yeah.
Why on earth must a real estate broker be aware of family law? They aren't mediating divorces.
They don't practice family law, no, but they have to be able to recognize situations where family law dictates property rights and can actually override the standard title registration. The most common scenario involves the marital or spousal home. Depending on the jurisdiction, even if the property is only registered in one spouse's name, the other spouse may have an implicit right to possession or a requirement to consent to the sale.
So if a broker facilitates a sale without getting that required spousal consent, the entire transaction could be voided later on.
Exactly. And the liability is immense. The broker has to be trained to identify those red flags, a seller who seems evasive about their marital status, or a spouse who's refusing to sign closing documents. And they have to immediately advise the client to seek independent legal advice before the transaction proceeds any further. This topic is pure risk mitigation.
Now we shift gears to public governance with Topic 12, municipal planning and zoning, and Topic 13, division of land. These are the government's big limitations on our ownership rights.
These represent some of the most significant limitations imposed by that police power of the state we talked about earlier. Municipal planning and zoning, that dictates the highest and best legal use of a property. It sets the rules for density, height, setbacks from the property line, and all the land use categories, residential R1, commercial C3, industrial I2, and so on.
Why is this so essential for a broker to know? I would assume the buyer's lawyer eventually checks the zoning.
The broker is the first point of contact, and they have a professional duty of care. Just consider a buyer who wants to purchase a property to run a commercial daycare from their home. If that land is zoned strictly for residential use, and the broker fails to verify and advise them on this, that buyer has just purchased a completely unusable asset for their purposes. The broker's failure to understand zoning is a massive liability. It fundamentally determines the property's potential value and its utility.
And Topic 13, division of land, that applies mostly to development, correct?
It does. It covers the legal process of subdivision or severance. So cutting a large parcel of land into smaller, buildable lots. And this isn't a casual decision. It's a highly regulated process under planning legislation. It's to ensure that the new lots are adequately serviced with water, sewage, roads, and that they align with the municipality's long-term planning goals. A broker who's dealing with land sales has to know the legal procedures for severance, or they were selling a client an illegal lot that can't be developed or financed. They're gatekeepers of orderly community development.
Our final topic in this compliance section, and one that carries some really heavy federal oversight, is Topic 14, FINTRAC compliance.
This is the absolute non-negotiable regulatory hurdle. It's imposed on the real estate sector by the federal government, implied here by the Canadian context. FINTRAC, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center of Canada, mandates that real estate professionals have to participate actively in combating money laundering and terrorist financing.
What are the specific actionable duties for a registrant under FINTRAC? What do they actually have to do?
There are three main areas. First is client identification and verification. Brokers have to take reasonable steps to verify the identity of everyone involved, especially the beneficial owners of corporations. Second is record keeping. Detailed records of the client ID, the business relationship, all transaction receipts, they have to be kept for specific periods of time. And third is reporting. Brokers are required to report specific transactions, particularly those involving large amounts of cash, there are thresholds, or any transaction that they deem suspicious, regardless of the amount.
So this means the broker isn't just selling, they're actively policing their own transactions for signs of potential criminal activity. What's the penalty if they fail to comply?
The penalties are severe. I mean, massive financial fines, often reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars, and even potential criminal prosecution for deliberate noncompliance. This topic literally transforms the real estate professional into a mandatory agent of financial integrity for the state. They have to implement and maintain these internal compliance regimes, which is far beyond the traditional definition of a sales agent.
That significantly raises the stakes. We've now established this incredibly comprehensive legal and regulatory structure. So let's shift our focus to specific property types and the societal factors that impact property value and use. We begin the specialization with Topic 15, condominium legislations, and Topic 16, residential and commercial tenancies. These seem to represent very specific forms of ownership and occupancy that require unique legal expertise.
They absolutely demand specialization because they deviate so sharply from the simple, fee simple ownership of, say, a detached home.
Let's focus on condominium legislations first. What's the legal complexity that's introduced when you buy a condo unit versus a house?
You're buying into a form of what's called stratified ownership. The individual owns the unit, the space inside the walls, but the land underneath and all the common elements, the roof, the exterior, the gym, the pool, are owned collectively by a corporation. And the key complexity lies in that corporate governance. A broker has to analyze not just the individual unit, but the financial health and the legal standing of the entire condominium corporation.
What kind of due diligence does that require? What must a broker be aware of?
Well, they have to request and then scrutinize the corporation's governing documents. That's the declaration and the bylaws. These dictate all the rules about pets, parking, rentals, maintenance, and crucially, they must analyze the reserve fund study and the current state of that reserve fund.
Why is the reserve fund so important?
Because that fund is what pays for major future repairs. A new roof, replacing the elevators, redoing the garage. If that fund is underfunded, the corporation has to impose something called a special assessment on all the unit owners to cover the shortfall. A broker who fails to identify a critically underfunded reserve fund and a looming special assessment of, say, $50,000 has failed their client catastrophically. The specific legislation covers these disclosure requirements.
Okay, moving to Topic 16. Tenancies. Why this separate study of residential versus commercial? They're both just renting, right?
The underlying philosophical approach in the law is completely different. Residential tenancies are heavily skewed toward consumer protection. The legislative acts often impose mandatory minimum standards of habitability, strict limits on rent increases, and very specific procedures for eviction. It's all about protecting the tenant's right to housing security.
And commercial tenancies.
They're generally treated as contracts between two sophisticated business entities, so the law is far more permissive. It allows the lease agreement itself to dictate most of the terms regarding rent repairs and termination. A broker has to know which law applies to which property to make sure they're advising on the correct regulatory framework. You just cannot apply residential eviction rules to a commercial dispute.
Next, we look at the interaction of the agent within the market itself. Topic 17 is marketing-related legislations, and Topic 18 is the Competition Act.
Marketing legislation is critical for consumer transparency. It governs how brokers can advertise their services and the properties they list. It's there to ensure that any claims they make regarding price, quality, location are truthful and not misleading. This prevents deceptive marketing and ensures accuracy in things like square footage, for instance.
But the specific inclusion of the Competition Act that suggests the rules go beyond just truthful advertising.
They do. The Competition Act targets the integrity of the market among the industry participants themselves. It prohibits anti-competitive behaviors, things like price fixing of commissions, market allocation where brokerages agree not to compete in certain areas, or bid rigging. A real estate professional has to understand that even casually discussing commission rates with a competitor could be construed as collusion and could lead to criminal charges under this act. It protects the consumer by ensuring vigorous, fair competition exists among brokerages.
Topic 19 brings us to a universal truth: taxation issues. Now, the agent isn't an accountant, but they must grasp the financial implications of government levies.
Absolutely. The agent needs to understand the consequences of various taxes on their client's decision-making process. They must be able to calculate and explain the impact of land transfer taxes, which can be a significant closing cost and often varies between provincial and municipal levels. And, of course, the annual burden of property taxes.
Are there more complicated tax concepts that they have to navigate?
Yes, they must understand the basic framework of capital gains tax implications on the sale of a property, particularly the concept of the primary residence exemption, which is what shields most homeowners from that tax. But if a client is selling a rental property, the broker has to immediately flag the likely tax consequences and strongly refer them to a tax professional. Otherwise, the client could get a very nasty surprise at tax time, and the broker might get blamed for it.
Topics 20 and 21 shift our perspective to long-term usage and liability, environmental protection, and energy conservation.
Right. These topics address modern liability and sustainability. Environmental protection laws govern the proper use of land and, importantly, mandate the remediation of historical contamination. Things like abandoned underground oil tanks or polluted soil from a previous industry. For commercial or industrial property, a broker often advises clients to conduct what's called a Phase I environmental site assessment during their due diligence.
And if contamination is found, the liability for the cleanup usually falls to the current owner, even if they're not the one who caused the pollution. That's a huge risk a broker needs to highlight.
Precisely. The liability can be catastrophic financially. And regarding energy conservation, this points toward compliance with modern building standards, energy efficiency requirements, and sometimes mandatory disclosures about a building's energy performance. This impacts operating costs and marketability, which links all the way back to those economic opportunities we discussed at the very beginning.
We finished the content with Topic 22, new home sales, and Topic 23, building and occupant safety.
These final two topics focus on very distinct consumer protection regimes. New home sales are treated as entirely separate from the resale market. They involve pre-construction contracts, which have unique cooling-off periods and cancellation rights, and they're often managed through their own specific regulations.
I'm assuming this is where mandatory warranty programs like Canarian here in Ontario come into play.
Yes, exactly. The broker has to understand the scope and the limitations of these statutory warranties that protect the buyer against defects in construction. And they typically distinguish between, materials, major structural issues, and occupancy standards. If a builder fails to deliver on time, the broker must advise the client on what their rights are under that warranty program, which is distinct from general contract law.
And finally, Topic 23, building and occupant safety. This feels like the ultimate practical check on the physical integrity of the asset itself.
This covers compliance with all the local codes, fire codes, electrical safety standards, structural requirements, and general habitability. The broker's duty here often translates into a duty to recommend a professional home inspection. They need to understand the difference between a patent defect, which is obvious, like a cracked window, and a latent defect, which is hidden, like poor foundation work.
And if a broker suspects a latent defect but doesn't disclose it, they are right back in violation of Topic 9, conduct of registrants.
Exactly. Even though they are not building inspectors, they have to ensure the property meets basic public safety mandates, and they must disclose any material facts they're aware of, even if those facts are hidden defects. It just reinforces that the professional's responsibility spans the entire life cycle of the asset, from its legal title and financial burden all the way to its physical safety and structural integrity.
That collective journey, from understanding the career structure all the way to mastering building safety codes, it really demonstrates the incredible, multifaceted expertise that's required. The syllabus demands proficiency across law, governance, finance, and physical structure.
It does, and the synthesis here is really clear. This essential curriculum ensures that a registrant must not just facilitate a sale, but they must possess a comprehensive understanding across 24 distinct legal and professional domains to safely shepherd a client through what is potentially the largest financial and legal decision of their entire lives.
We've covered 23 key topics, and the sheer density of essentials in this curriculum is it's overwhelming, yet it's perfectly structured. It shows that real competence in real estate is a high-stakes tightrope walk across this vast web of legislation that touches on everything from local zoning restrictions to national financial security.
The syllabus functions as a really impressive high-level strategy document. It revealed exactly where the biggest risks and liabilities lie, both for the professional and for the public.
And as we noted in the front matter of these study notes, right after this exhaustive list of topics, the very final section is simply titled, Mini-Cram 10 tips for the exam.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The inclusion of a strategy guide like that is highly instructive. It's an acknowledgement that just having this dense volume of knowledge isn't enough. The true skill that's required for success in the field and on the exam is knowing how to quickly synthesize and strategically apply the correct piece of legislation to a rapidly evolving, high-pressure transactional moment. Structure and strategy, those are the final skills needed to transition from being a student to being an effective risk manager.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, I think the ultimate lesson we can draw from this essential curriculum is that modern real estate practice is predominantly focused on mitigating risk and the competent interpretation of law. The success of the professional seems to rest not on salesmanship, but on their ability to correctly identify which of these 23 pillars of knowledge applies to their current client's dilemma.
The true essential skill these registrants are being tested on is knowing which lever to pull. Is this a zoning problem? Is it a fine track reporting requirement? Is it a spousal consent issue under family law? Or is it a contract condition failure? Their value lies entirely in making that correct, timely legal identification.
A truly fascinating blueprint for a very complex profession. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the essentials of real estate knowledge. We hope this map helps you navigate the world of land and transactions.